China is entering a battle against a living storm capable of turning entire farmlands into desert within just a few hours. Swarms of locusts, numbering in the billions, sweep across fields like a massive destruction machine, leaving behind barren land and wiping out a year's worth of farmers' hard work. Despite being only a few centimeters long, this tiny creature has repeatedly pushed nations toward food crises. From the Middle East to Africa and South Asia, governments have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on aerial spraying, pesticides, and nationwide campaigns to stop the devastation. Yet time and again, these winged destroyers return, crossing borders and rendering control efforts nearly meaningless. While much of the world continues trying to eliminate them, China has chosen a strategy that many find hard to believe. Instead of destroying the threat, they have turned this nightmare into a massive economic opportunity. So how did they do it? Let's find out with Mandarin Tech. Locusts are different from most insects that live scattered in nature. When their numbers suddenly increase, they change their behavior and gather into extremely large swarms. Each female can lay 150 to 200 eggs, causing the population to grow exponentially within just a few weeks. From only a few individuals at first, the sky can quickly turn into a dense storm of wings. A single swarm can travel over 150 kilometers a day, crossing deserts, oceans, and national borders. According to the United Nations, just one swarm covering 1 square kilometer can consume enough food to feed 35,000 people in a single day. And in reality, there are rarely only one swarm. Scientists often call them nature's harvesting machines. In East Africa, locust outbreaks have destroyed 247,000 acres of farmland in Somalia, wiped out over 40,000 tons of grain in Ethiopia, and damaged hundreds of thousands of hectares of crops in Kenya, reducing harvests by up to 15% in a single season. This fear is ancient. The Bible described locusts as the 8th plague of Egypt, when the sky darkened and vegetation was stripped bare. Thousands of years later, the same disaster still returns, stronger, faster, and harder to stop. Even in the modern age of science and technology, locusts remain one of the few natural disasters humans have never fully controlled. The moment the sky begins to change color with incoming locust swarms, every farming plan immediately turns into a race for survival. Aircraft are deployed at dawn, spraying chemicals over farmland stretching across hundreds of square kilometers in the hope of stopping the advancing wave of insects. Governments have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on pesticides and large-scale national control campaigns. In many places, farmers even burn their own fields to create desperate walls of fire, accepting the loss of their crops rather than letting the locusts devour everything. But the problem has never been a lack of human effort. It lies in the very way locusts exist. They do not stay in one place long enough to be destroyed. They move constantly. Today they appear in one country, tomorrow they become a disaster for another. Just as one region begins to bring an outbreak under control, new swarms emerge somewhere else and continue the cycle. For decades, eradication campaigns have failed to deliver lasting results, while leaving behind an increasingly clear cost: chemicals covering vast farmland, agricultural soils gradually weakening, and farming ecosystems beginning to lose the balance they once had. In 2020, the world witnessed one of the most severe locust crises of the modern era erupting across East Africa. Massive swarms of locusts emerged from the Arabian Peninsula, sweeping through Yemen, Ethiopia, and Kenya, before spreading deep into the African continent like an unstoppable wave of insects. In many regions, the sky turned black as billions of insects blocked out the sunlight at once. Scientists estimated that some swarms covered hundreds of square kilometers and contained up to 80 billion individuals, enough to consume food capable of feeding millions of people in a single day. For China, locusts are not a distant threat. Memories of outbreaks that once devastated grasslands and farmland remain very vivid. In 2000, northern provinces such as Inner Mongolia and Xinjiang recorded major infestations, forcing authorities to deploy aircraft spraying chemicals over tens of thousands of square kilometers in order to protect crops. For many years, China entered the same battle as the rest of the world, to destroy, control, and stop the swarms by every possible means. But after decades of fighting an enemy that almost never truly disappears, a bold question began to emerge. What if this disaster was never actually a problem that needed to be destroyed? After decades of fighting, the direction of the battle eventually began to change. In China, locusts are no longer seen simply as an enemy that must be eliminated, but as a resource waiting to be utilized. Because behind the swarms of insects once considered a nightmare lies a truth that few people pay attention to. Locusts are in fact an extremely rich natural source of protein, containing protein levels comparable to beef, requiring very little water, using almost no farmland, and growing at a speed that no traditional livestock industry can match. For a country with more than 1 billion people, where food security has always been a strategic issue, this opens up a completely different way of thinking. In Chinese culinary culture, the use of insects as food has existed for thousands of years, not merely as a survival solution, but as a familiar source of nutrition within the traditional food ecosystem. The locust swarms that once forced aircraft to take off in order to destroy them are now actively captured by people, raised in controlled farming systems, and turned into a new link in the modern agricultural economy. In China's view, they are no longer a threat. They are a mobile, natural source of free protein. Then something unusual began to happen. In northern agricultural provinces of China, such as Shandong, Henan, and Inner Mongolia, numerous locust farms gradually started to appear, transforming what was once hunted down in the wild into livestock managed through organized systems. To turn an insect once seen as a disaster into a future food source, everything begins with carefully designed spaces, places where nature is recreated under strict control. These farms are usually located in well-ventilated areas that take advantage of natural sunlight while avoiding strong winds and heavy rain. Inside, hundreds of fine mesh cages are arranged in rows like a miniature industrial complex built for insects. The floor of each enclosure is covered with sand and sawdust to maintain moisture and create an ideal environment for locust reproduction. The temperature is consistently kept at around 30 to 35 degrees Celsius, with humidity between 60 and 70%, recreating a permanent summer, the perfect condition to accelerate their life cycle. In just 30 to 45 days, a new generation reaches maturity and becomes ready for harvest far faster than any traditional livestock. While cattle or pigs require large areas of land, enormous amounts of water, and months of feeding, locusts require almost no grazing land, consume very little water, and produce virtually no methane, one of the largest sources of emissions in global livestock farming. With densities reaching thousands of individuals per square meter, these farms operate like living protein factories, producing continuously almost all year round. After only a few weeks of growth, the farming enclosures begin to enter the most important stage. Gone are the days of darkened skies and frantic chases across open fields. The harvesting of locusts now takes place directly inside the farms, under nearly complete control. When temperature and lighting conditions are adjusted, the locusts begin to move and gather into dense clusters. Workers open the mesh cages and gently collect them into large containers, quickly, efficiently, and in a process that repeats like a standardized routine. Within a short time, dozens of kilograms of locusts are removed from the breeding area. Thanks to their short life cycle of about 30 to 45 days, each farm can harvest multiple batches every year. In China, fresh locusts typically sell for $8 to $12 per kilogram, providing farmers with a stable source of income. After being harvested and transported to the factory, trays of live locusts are moved directly into the primary processing area, where every operation takes place in a closed, sterile environment with strict temperature control. The first step is washing, but it is far more complex than simply spraying them with water. The locusts are placed into automated vibrating tanks filled with circulating water, combined with gentle ultrasonic waves and rotating stainless steel drums with angled grooves. This mechanism removes dust, sand, waste, leaf fragments, and even the natural oil layer on the outer shell without tearing wings or breaking legs. Next, the production line moves the locusts onto mesh conveyor belts, where low-pressure cold air removes excess water, drying them efficiently without causing thermal shock. Some factories also integrate automated camera inspection systems that detect and remove deformed individuals or those contaminated with impurities, ensuring that only specimens meeting quality standards proceed to the next stage of processing. From this cleaning stage onward, the locusts are truly accepted as a food ingredient. They are no longer treated as insects, but as clean protein ready to be transformed into snacks, protein powder, or even high-end culinary dishes. After being cleaned and prepared, the locusts are dropped into a pan of gently bubbling hot oil. A crackling sound rises like the music of harvest season, while a rich aroma fills the air, carrying hints of fresh grass and the earthy scent of the fields. Within just a few minutes, they turn a glossy golden color, their bodies crisp and tight, their legs curling like freshly puffed crackers. They are lifted out, drained, and then sprinkled with chili salt, a touch of green pepper, or finely sliced kaffir lime leaves. With the first bite, a crisp crunch spreads across the tongue, followed by a light richness and subtle flavors that seem to carry the warmth of sunlight, the scent of rice fields, and the memory of open farmland. No dipping sauce is needed, no complicated preparation. Each locust is a small gift from nature, simple and rustic, yet memorable enough to make anyone savor the taste long after the meal is finished. But the value of locusts does not stop at insect farming. Soon after harvest, a large portion of the production is directed into another rapidly expanding system, the animal feed industry. In many agricultural regions of China, frog farms, duck farms, and poultry operations have become the largest consumers. Fresh locusts are rich in protein and natural amino acids, helping livestock grow faster, improving gut health, and reducing the need for antibiotics. With protein content that can exceed 60%, they are becoming a highly nutritious feed source that can partially replace fish meal and soy, two ingredients that are becoming increasingly expensive on the global market. For farmers, the benefits appear almost immediately. Feed costs decrease, weight gain improves, and meat quality becomes noticeably better. Commercial frog farms and large-scale duck operations have begun forming direct supply relationships with locust breeding facilities, creating a closed supply chain in which a former agricultural pest becomes a new link in modern livestock production. Once locusts enter the animal feed supply chain, the story no longer belongs to just one country or a single agricultural sector. It begins to touch a much larger issue that the entire world is facing: the protein crisis of the 21st century. The global population is expected to exceed 9.7 billion people by 2050. This means the demand for meat, eggs, and seafood will increase by nearly 70% compared with today. But traditional livestock farming is gradually reaching its natural limits. Producing beef requires thousands of liters of water for every kilogram of meat. Livestock already occupies nearly 80% of the world's agricultural land, yet provides less than 20% of the calories consumed by humanity. At the same time, the livestock sector is a major source of methane emissions, contributing to climate change. In this context, locusts, and more broadly insect protein, are beginning to be viewed as a potential alternative solution. They convert feed into protein far more efficiently than livestock, require very little water, and place almost no pressure on farmland. A single kilogram of feed can produce several times more insect protein than cattle or pigs. What was once considered a strange idea is now becoming the focus of serious research in Europe, the United States, and Japan. International agricultural organizations even consider insects to be one of the most sustainable food sources of the future. This may be the greatest turning point in the entire story. For thousands of years, humanity's reaction to nature has followed the same instinct. Anything that threatens crops must be eliminated. Pests are sprayed with chemicals. Weeds are pulled out completely. Agricultural threats are eradicated at any cost, even when that cost is exhausted soil and unbalanced farming ecosystems. But the locust model moves in the opposite direction. Instead of fighting their life cycle, humans are beginning to take advantage of the very traits that once made them powerless: rapid reproduction, extreme adaptability, and exponential population growth. Nature is no longer an opponent on the other side of the battlefield. It becomes part of the production chain, where a pest is brought under control, transformed, and turned into value. What is remarkable is that this shift is no longer just a story from China. As biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and precision agriculture advance, more and more countries are experimenting with production systems built around biological principles rather than resisting them. From automated insect farms in Europe to alternative protein systems in North America and circular agriculture projects in Japan, a new approach is slowly emerging, harnessing the power of nature instead of trying to completely control it. Once a nightmare that could darken the sky and wipe out harvests within hours, locusts have now become part of a production system that humans actively control. What has changed is not nature itself, but the way humans perceive it. When a battle lasting for centuries failed to bring victory, a new direction began to emerge, turning a threat into a resource. And sometimes the future of agriculture may not lie in destroying nature, but in learning how to live with it. Like and follow Mandarin Tech so you don't miss the next incredible technology stories.